to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Dana White's Contender Series Week 6, of course, taking place this upcoming Tuesday night. This show has been such a treat for us MMA fans. I think we need to take a second here just to appreciate what this show is all about. Of course, the template of the show, the foundation of the show, right, built on just putting on fan-friendly type of fights. If you want to get a contract, you can't just go in there and put out a dull victory. You have to go out there and deliver a fan-friendly affair. And of course, that has translated into just nonstop action every Tuesday night. Of course, not every fight can be an amazing, slugfest type of fight. We did have one week that was somewhat of a blooper. That was that fight card that was headlined by Joe Pyfer. But even in the main event, Pyfer came through and gave us a little bit of action. But statistically, this show is just nonstop fireworks statistically compared to any other type of MMA that you're watching, in my opinion. So, what an awesome thing that Dana White has put together. The fights taking place tomorrow night. I'm filming this Monday morning. Are on paper going to be some real exciting fights taking place, in my opinion. All these fighters were fun to break down when we broke down tape on them. They deliver, and I think that we're going to have a real treat tomorrow night. So just wanted to put that out there. Of course, the fight card headlined by José Henrique and Yusaku Kinoshita, the Japanese fighter. Both fighters essentially undefeated. We'll be getting to that here a little bit later in the breakdown. But, Yusaku did have that one loss, but we'll get into that loss. It was not a loss. I mean, he was the fighter on top of his opponent, stomping his head on conscience. So we'll be talking about that here in a second. And real quick, before we jump into the first fight, if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Catch me on all my social media platforms, specifically Instagram, MMA Fortune Teller _. I'm also on Twitter at the MMA Teller. I appreciate you guys so much. In the first fight of the card, we have Alex Morgan taking on Blake Bilder. Alex Morgan, one of the top prospects coming out of the Canadian mixed martial arts fight scene. He's been in there with the cream of the crop as far as Canadian mixed martial arts goes. Did just take a loss to Charles Jourdain. He actually was doing decent in that fight as long as it lasted. I mean, he showed the striking skills that he possesses. He was hanging in there at one point in time in that fight, but then Jourdain hit him with a wild spinning back fist. You got to pull the tape up. The fight's on YouTube, and eventually was able to pull off a submission on him there. But do understand that submission was set up via strikes. But Alex Morgan is a solid striker. I do believe that is his bread and butter. He's a striking first type of fighter. He's putting a lot of work in with some of the best over in Canada, training over at TriStar. He's a fighter that's had Firas Zahabi in his corner before. Not sure if he still has him working with him like that, but I know that he has had Firas Zahabi, who is one of the best MMA coaches in the game, in his corner. I do believe he's put in some time over at Tiger Muay Thai, I believe. He's a gritty fighter. He has good cardio. He really pushes the pace in his fighters. But again, the striking is where it's at. I mean, he's looking to break the will of his opponents by just putting a high pace on the feet with the striking, and eventually looking to land that big shot, or just not even just that big shot. He'll do that as well, but also if he doesn't land that big shot, he'll just try to overwhelm you with shots and just kind of break you down. I saw one fight where he just really broke his opponent down and just laid it on him there in the feet. So has some good power in his shots. From a technical standpoint, I mean, he's not a fighter that's going to really wow you as far as, seeing his defensive skills and seeing his shell and just really throwing crisp, tight type of boxing shots. He kind of loops a little bit with his shots, but he makes it work. And I think that it also transfers a little bit more power with his style there. So, as long as he doesn't get clipped on the return, I mean, he could really give his opponent some trouble. His opponent, Blake Bilder, I've been a little bit more impressed with what I've seen from him from the grappling side of things. Seen him put in some work on his opponents down on the mat. This is a fighter that oozes with confidence, first and foremost. If you want to listen to some interesting interviews, or not even interviews, that as well, but if you also want to just see him on the mic, on his Instagram stories and whatnot, his Instagram lives. He uploaded a couple of them to YouTube. I mean, this is a fighter that goes out, wins a fight, goes back to the locker room and just hops on the mic and talks about how he's pushing himself to the top, how he's going to the top. This is a fighter that is extremely confident on the feet. I'm not going to say that I was not impressed with him. I think he's decent there, but I do think that there's some work to be done. Of course, I think he was he the CFFC? Was he the CFFC champion? Yep, the CFFC champion, coming off that knockout over Regivaldo Carvalho. Got that finish in the third round there. Pulled off a triangle choke in his fight before that against Frank Buenafonte. Decent records in those last two fights, but if you kind of drop it back to some of his early fights, of course, some lower level talent, but handling business all the way down to the amateur scene. This guy has not tasted defeat so far. So did have a split decision draw early in his career over at King of the Cage. He's a solid fighter. And again, the thing that stands out to me is his confidence. He will be stepping into the cage Tuesday night, expecting to go out there and dominate Alex Morgan. I think that he might try to lean on his grappling a little bit more so. I'm not sure he's going to really enjoy trading so much with Alex Morgan. Like I said, I've been decently impressed with Alex Morgan striking, but I think that there's a possibility if this fight does take place in the feet that Bilder can potentially land a big shot and then mix that into some grappling, try to set up a submission as we saw Jordan do. Or if Bilder's going to take this fight, maybe he gets some takedowns and is able to do some work there. But I want to also say this, although I'm not raving about Alex Morgan's grappling, you could pull up a fight of his on YouTube where there was extensive time down on the mat. He was off his back, putting in some work there, and he definitely knows what he's doing down there. And I think that his grappling's actually catching up slowly to his striking. So he's definitely been putting in work down there, and don't be shocked if this fight does go down to the mat that you see a fighter like Alex Morgan actually pull something off down there as well. All right, so I mean, this is a solid fighter. Now, there's a lot of favorites on this fight card. I want to cut to the chase here. Okay, there's a lot of favorites, and I think that a lot of the favorites on this fight card are deservingly so. When you break down the tape on these fighters, they are the fighters that are deservingly so to be not even just favorites, but where the lines are. You're going to see some hefty favorites up in the minus 200 range, and I think that I see why. Of course, I don't want to just give you guys who's going to win the fight. I want to try to give you guys an edge from a betting standpoint from where these lines are. I'm going to say that Blake Bilder, although he's a plus 160 dog, I think that underdog value there is one on this fight card that stood out to me a little bit more so out of the 5 fights. I do like Alex Morgan to get the job done here. I think Alex Morgan should win this fight. I think he should have success in the feet, and I think that he should more than hold his own in the grappling exchanges if Bilder wants to go down to the mat there. From a betting standpoint, if you're looking for some value, Bilder is a fighter that can definitely show up and get the job done. I'm telling you guys that right now, but I do think Alex Morgan is gonna handle business. In the strawweight division, we have Viktoriya Dudakova taking on Maria Silva. Of course, Maria Silva has already fought in Dana White's Contender Series. She had that victory over Catherine Paprocki. We've since seen Catherine Paprocki have a little performance over on the Ultimate Fighter, where she lost her only fight there in the show. Catherine Paprocki. Maria Silva looked good in that fight. She obviously didn't get the contract. She handled business. I felt like she could have pushed the pace a little bit more so in that fight. Obviously, if she wanted that contract, Dana White and the UFC brass is expecting a lot of you there. But Maria Silva definitely showed that she's a solid striker. Of course, her striking is her bread and butter for sure. That's the strength of her fight game. Believe that she is some type of champion, which again, you could throw around champion. You could throw that word around a lot, but obviously there's different levels of being a champion. But to an extent, some type of striking champion over there in Brazil, and she definitely has some power in her hands. When you break down tape on her, I was pretty impressed with her last fight against Ewelina Wozniak, who was undefeated going into that fight, and even after taking the loss to Maria Silva, bounced back with another victory. I think that she was a formidable opponent. Fight took place over in Aries. This was the victory that Maria Silva had since Dana White's Contender Series. Maria Silva was landing some heavy overhand rights when her opponent was trying to work the leg kicks. I love the way she counters those leg kicks with big overhand rights. But the main thing I was impressed with is that you see that Maria Silva is working on her grappling and ground game. Of course, getting that rear naked choke to get the victory there just 5 months ago. If her ground game comes around, and catches up to her striking, she's going to be a dangerous and complete fighter there. Her opponent, Viktoriya Dudakova, take a look at her over here, man. Woo! Dudakova, I mean, I don't know. She didn't look like this when you see her in the cage, but I mean, you got to understand they're not all dolled up and they're going in there to battle it out. It's a little bit of a different look, as you saw a glimpse of her there. But if she can come into the cage looking like she did in that one picture, sign her up. But, in all seriousness, this is a tough and young fighter. She has a lot of work in front of her, in my opinion. She's only, 24 years old, 23 years old, 23 and a half. She needs to put in a lot more work, in my opinion. I know she's 5-0, but I wasn't necessarily impressed with the resume there. Wasn't necessarily impressed with the tape I broke down on her. I know she's going in there and finishing these opponents. I mean, you see a 10-6 opponent there against Lachakova. But other than that, lower level fighters, in my opinion, and not even just from a record standpoint, when you actually watch the tape on the fights you're able to pull up. I was watching one fight where I couldn't even tell if it was a mixed martial arts fight or if it was a just like an exhibition wrestling match. It's like the fighters didn't even know how to throw any strikes, and it's almost like they were allowing each other to pull reversals off on each other instead of just solidifying position. It was kind of weird. Dudakova was being controlled, and her opponent basically allowed her to reverse her. It was kind of strange. But her grappling is her base, I believe. And if she's going to get the job done here, she's going to have to push a heavy grappling pace on Maria Silva and try to exploit her down there. I don't think she's going to want to stand with Maria Silva. I could see Silva landing some big shots. And in fact, that's the route that I'm going here. I think that Silva is going to land some big shots in this fight, and you're going to see her get her hand raised once again. Whether or not she gets the knockout, we'll see. I mean, this is a women's strawweight bout. I mean, typically you don't see a lot of finishes like that, but I do believe that Maria Silva has potential to do something like that here. I think that she could bloody Dudakova up and hurt her in this fight. So potentially there's some damage done, and she's on the verge of getting the fight stopped there. But of course, it's hard to favor a finish. I like Maria Silva to get the job done here and to get a contract on the show tomorrow night. I mean, she has more pro experience. She has the striking experience as well. She's already fought on Dana White's Contender Series. And then you got Dudakova, who's very young. And like I said, who needs more time to put in work. In the lightweight division, we have two fighters that are a little bit older than what you see on the show. Guys that are a little bit more established. And this fight's going to be really big for both men, as they don't really have as much of an extended window in time to make it to the UFC as some of the younger fighters that come through the show. Rodrigo Lídio taking on Mateusz Rębecki. We have the Brazilian versus the Polish fighter here. Mateusz Rębecki, 15-1, has an extensive background over on the Polish mixed martial arts scene. Mateusz has been quite impressive. And one thing that is impressive to me is who he's training with, as you see him with some of the better fighters, some of the best fighters around his weight on planet Earth. And that's always a very good sign. You see him with Grant Dawson and Movsar Evloev over at American Top Team. So you know he's training with some of the best of them. Besides that, I've been impressed with what I've seen from him on his fight tape. It's no surprise that he's coming into this fight as a pretty hefty favorite. Rodrigo Lídio. Here's the thing with Lídio. Rodrigo Lídio, he's a very rangy fighter. He's a solid striker. When you break down tape on him against some of the more talented fighters that he's in there with, he's a little bit on the back foot. You've seen him kind of pressured a little bit, but pressured more so, and he's kind of looking for that big shot. I've seen him landed on some of his opponents. Landed a beautiful knee on one opponent and ended up knocking him out right after he landed the knee. So he's a little bit of a sharpshooter, a little bit of a sniper. He's looking for that big shot. And I think that's important to note, because in a fight like this, I think that's going to be his route to victory. I think that if Lídio is going to get the job done, I think he definitely needs to land that big shot in this fight, because a guy like Mateusz Rębecki is going to have the grappling advantage. He pushes a crazy pace. I could definitely see him being the aggressor throughout this fight. I see him coming forward. He has a crazy, frantic type of fighting style where he's just constantly kind of feinting and just coming forward. He's a southpaw. He's very unorthodox. And I could definitely see him winning this fight if he doesn't get clipped. That's the route I'm going here. I feel pretty confident about that. Here's the thing, though. With his frantic type of style and his aggressive style coming in, there's going to be opportunities for Lídio to try to capitalize with the knee. And he really loves those knees. When you watch some of his fights, every time he's pressured up against the cage, he kind of allows his opponent to pressure him up against the cage. He's constantly jumping up, throwing that knee, trying to time a takedown. So be careful. Or excuse me, I should say be careful. You're not the one stepping in there with him, but Mateusz, Rębecki should be careful for that. And from a straight up standpoint of how I see this fight going down, I see Rębecki really pushing a pace on him and eventually getting this fight down to the mat, being able to avoid the BJJ skills of Lídio. I know Lidio's polished down there as well, but I think he avoids any type of subs down there. Like I said, he's working with some of the best of them over at American Top Team. He'll be ready to go down there. And not only will he avoid the submissions from Lídio, I think that he could really inflict some damage on him and potentially get a finish down there on the mat. One fight that I was impressed with when it came to Mateusz Rębecki was let's see if I can pull it up here. It was this fight here, the Magomedov fight, where he eventually broke him, took him down, and just was hammering elbows, had him in the crucifix position, was really working on him, working some damage down on him. And here's the thing, a guy like Magomedov is a very similar fighter to a Rodrigo Lídio. Magomedov, he's very rangy. He was a very long fighter. He's a talented fighter. In my opinion, he might be a better fighter than Rodrigo Lídio. So if you want to kind of have an idea how this fight plays out, barring no flash knockout, I think it plays out very similarly to that fight. And you could pull that fight up on YouTube. So yes, I do have Rębecki to get the job done. And I think he gets a contract. I think that he puts on an impressive performance and the UFC signs him. And then you'll see him stepping in and fighting some of the best in the world over in the UFC. He's put in the work. What does he have now? 16 pro fights. He's 15-1. He's ready to fight in the UFC, and I think that he gets the job done. Now, from a betting standpoint, let's slide over to the betting line. Which I'm sorry, you know what? We didn't even brush upon the Maria Silva betting line real quick. Yes, Maria Silva is a big favorite, of course. She's a -260. It's a common theme throughout this fight card. Look at this. Mateusz Rębecki, he's a -240, almost the same line there. Another high favorite. Now, again, I'm going to jump back to the Maria Silva line, -260. That's a little bit of a high line, in my opinion, for a women's strawweight bout. I wouldn't be extremely confident in her in a -260. Dudakova, she's very green. We don't know how much she's progressing, so possibly more value there, but I don't know if I see her getting the job done. Maybe you just avoid that fight. From a betting standpoint with the Rębecki fight, I mean, another high line here. Rodrigo Lídio is not an incompetent fighter. I mean, he knows how to put in work in the cage as well. He knows how to end fights. We talked about that avenue of defeat. I think that you might be better off looking for a prop line on Lídio to win via finish, in my opinion, because I'm telling you, I don't really see that decision victory coming his way when you break down tape. So maybe you want to eye him, get a juicy line on a finish, whereas for Rębecki, potentially you want to mix him in a parlay. And I wouldn't necessarily target him via finish or via anything specifically, because I think he has a couple different options. He may break Lídio down on the mat, may break him and end up stopping the fight, or he might just push a dominant victory and just win a unanimous decision. So maybe you mix him in a parlay there at -240. Rębecki's the real deal. Now, this is the fun fight on the card right here, taking place in the light heavyweight division. Two strikers, a lot of promise for us to see a knockout in this fight here. Matěj, Peňáz taking on Sedriques, Dumas, both rangy strikers for the division. Again, strikers, fighters that very much favor their striking, but they're two different kinds of strikers, right? You have a guy in Peňáz that's a little bit more polished. He's a fighter that has experience over in Glory striking. Has been in there at a little bit of a bigger stage, and you see him over. Yeah, he's had a couple of fights over on the Glory kickboxing scene. Has some Muay Thai fights under his belt. Has a little bit more pro experience, at least listed on Tapology. And he's working on his overall MMA game. I've been very pleased with what I see on tape. When you break down tape on this guy, he's a ferocious striker. But the main thing that stood out to me is the pace that he can push. This is a fighter that has really, really good cardio. He's not going to let you down late in the fight. He's going to continuously push the pace on his opponents. And a lot of times, when you're watching tape on him, a lot of times he was the guy that was breaking his opponent. And yeah, he can land the flashy knockout easily as well. But he also can just push his opponent to a point where they just don't really want to be in there with him anymore, and they kind of give him an opportunity for him to just to land a couple shots and finish him up. So I mean, you see him, he's in phenomenal shape. He's very technically sound, very defensively sound. And then you have his opponent, Sedriques Dumas, who I believe has a lot of potential. This is a fighter that's very explosive, very quick twitch with his striking. You see he has a couple knockouts here. In fact, his first 5 MMA fights are via finish. You see he has an extensive amateur resume as well. You know, they're not listing some of these fights as kickboxing fights. I don't know if some of the fights that I saw are not listed here in Tapology, but I did see him in some kickboxing matches with, you know, big gloves, and they were amateur matches, I do believe, because he had the shin pads on his legs. So maybe even more experience than what you're seeing here. But the difference is, again, you're not seeing any fights really on the same type of stage, in my opinion, from what I saw from his opponent. I mean, you see some recognizable promotions, island fights, you know, CFFC, he did take a loss, but that was an amateur bout there. And again, you look at his pro experience, not impressed with the opponents. 1-7, 1-2, 5-8, 1-0, 1-0, and then finally took out a reputable opponent, I guess you would call, and Aaron Hingba. Here's the thing, though, man. Like I said, Dumas is explosive, and he has the potential to go out there and knock out anybody. I truly believe that. He goes into this fight Tuesday night, he lands a big shot, he wins the fight, period. It's as simple as that. So this is a dangerous fight here for his opponent here, the Czech fighter. But that being said, it is a dangerous fight, and this fight could go either way. When you got 2 big boys going in there and they're slinging leather, obviously anything could happen. But I got to keep it real with you guys, right? Mateusz Peňáz is a little bit more impressive on tape. He's a little bit more polished up. I feel like he's a little bit more game mentally from what I've seen from him on tape, just the way he's gotten in there on some of the bigger stages and has shown up and performed. It looks a little bit more impressive to me when I'm watching it. And I got to lean his way. But I do believe that Dumas is live. All right, so let me be clear right now. I don't want to keep just slinging these favorites at you guys. We're going to get to the betting line. Dumas is live to get a knockout in this fight. He is, especially in the first round. When they go in there, if this is one of those types of Dana White's Contender Series fights where they just come at each other and they clash, Dumas can land a big shot. There's no question about it. Now, the more the fight goes on, like I said, I've been very, very impressed with Peñáz's pace that he pushes in his fights. He's in phenomenal shape. I do not expect to see him slow down. And again, I still am more impressed with his overall striking ability. So I do have to pick here Mateusz Peňáz to win the fight. I think that he probably puts on a spectacular performance, and I think that he gets the contract. That's the route I'm going to go. But again, I shouldn't say it like that. I think he puts on a spectacular performance. Maybe that I didn't word that the best, because there's potential that he faces some adversity here. But I think that there's a good chance that he goes out there and gets the job done. And I just think stylistically that these two fighters are going to clash. So if he does get the job done in that type of situation, it's going to be pointing in the direction of him getting the contract. You're going to see his physical demeanor and all that, and he's going to look like a UFC fighter. And I think that I think Dana White and the boys are going to be chomping at the bit just to get him signed, just based on the way he goes out there, performs, and looks. So I see Peñáz getting a contract. From a betting standpoint, -170. That line has actually came down a little bit. I saw him at -190. So again, people respecting Dumas's game, respecting that this is a light heavyweight match that of 2 guys that can really throw down and really lay it out there, and anyone can get clipped and get put out. But if Peñáz comes down a little bit more, so you might really want to jump on that line. If you see that come down to -150, that's a solid line there. -170 is not necessarily horrible, but it's not maybe the best, because like I said, this fight can go anyway. And now we take a look at the main event of the card. I love this matchup. 2 highly touted prospects from 2 parts of the world. Of course, Yusaku, Kinoshita, one of the top prospects coming from the Japanese mixed martial arts scene. And then you got José Henrique, a top prospect from the Brazilian mixed martial arts side of things. I love this fight. Yusaku, Kinoshita, he really embodies everything of what you think of a Japanese mixed martial arts fighter. He has the true fighting spirit within him. When you break down tape on him, it's a real pleasure to watch. Of course, where he's been fighting, they allow the head stomps and all that. So it's just like vintage pride stuff. One of his losses, which is a fight I definitely want to talk about here, he got DQ'd as he grabbed the cage and as he was stomping on the head of Ryoichiro Sumimura. Just understand that in that fight that Yusaku dropped him with the beautiful right, I believe it was, and then was following him down to the mat and was on his way to finishing the fight. He was on his way to winning that fight, but he accidentally grabbed the cage as he was stomping on his head. And it was crazy. He was stomping on his head. His head was bouncing off the canvas like a basketball, put him out, and they ended up reviewing it. They came back in the cage, and they said that he actually loses the fight for grabbing the cage like that. So, it was a shame, to be honest. I mean, that was his fight. He should still be undefeated, but as long as you understand what was going on there, and that was a loss over in Rizin. But he's basically an undefeated fighter. He's 22 years old. Then you got José Henrique, a fighter that's 5-0. He is coming off a fight where some people thought that he lost that fight, including Big Nog, Antonio Nogueira. He was on the telecast there on that LFA showing, and he said, as the fight ended, he thought that the fight should be going to Pedro Oliveira. If you guys remember, if you saw the fight, Pedro Oliveira did hurt him very bad in the second round, and it could have even been a 10-8 round. But you got to give José Henrique some real credit for showing how tough he is and for having some big moments. And in the third round, he actually dropped his opponent as well. He's an extremely tall and rangy fighter, loves to work the knees and the elbows into his striking, gives a lot of guys trouble there. Expect if he's going to have success in this fight that he's definitely going to have to land some heavy knees. If he's not getting in some work with his knees and elbows, I think that he could be in trouble, because although he does have obviously a really long reach that he brings into the cage with him, I'm not super impressed with his boxing. Of course, he has a little bit of giraffe syndrome. You guys know that's been going around. A lot of these longer, lankier fighters have been spreading giraffe syndrome amongst each other, and I believe he caught it from Luke Rockhold when they were training together. Just messing around with you guys. Obviously, for those of you who didn't know, because someone actually reached out to me and asked me what giraffe syndrome was. It's me just poking some fun at some of the more lengthy fighters that kind of lose their footing and kind of are a little bit wobbly in there. They're fighting like a baby deer at times. And interestingly enough, when you break down tape on José Henrique, he's done that in his fights a lot. I've seen him throwing head kicks, kind of losing his balance. His legs are giving out on him. But he is a warrior. He's a fun fighter to watch. But he's been matched in there with some lower level talent. He's absolutely went in there and has bulldozed those fighters. Like I said, favoring the knees, just going there and just clinching up and really working some of those fighters. Punches and knees. You see the victory over Lucas Prestas. But look at the level of experience of these fighters. Very low. And then in his last fight against a reputable opponent, it was a war, and he showed some things. But like I said, some people thought that he lost that fight. Whereas you got Yusaku Kinoshita, who has been very impressive, going out there, finishing everybody that he's been in the cage with, including the loss. He finished him. Remember that all finishes, showing diverse attacks in his game, going out there, submitting opponents. I've seen him pull off a rear naked choke, a front choke, knocking dudes out, stomping on their heads, pulling off arm bars all throughout his amateur career. To me, he has been very impressive. I liked what I've seen from him. I was close to going with Henrique here. I wanted to give you guys a dog pick, but again, we're going to get into the betting perspective from this fight. But I could not go with Henrique, because if Henrique doesn't land a big shot and end this fight early, and I see if there's a situation where these guys are just going to war, I believe that Yusaku is just going to be the fighter that's a little bit more crisp and a little bit more technically sound and a little bit quicker to the shot as far as his landing his strikes. I think that he'll be a little bit more explosive and a little bit more tight, and he'll close the distance and he'll land those heavy shots. And I could even see him getting a knockout here, which shouldn't be surprising to you guys, right? I mean, he's been going in there knocking dudes out. But Henrique's a little bit, like I said, how do I say? He's there to be hit. At least when you watch his last fight, he was there to be hit. He got dropped in that fight. He got really beat up, but he is tough. He's not an easy guy to put out. But if there's a fighter that can go in there and put you out or finish you in one way or another, it's the 22-year-old Japanese prospect. And if you go over to IG and you watch his body movement and whatnot, he doesn't fight like this, right? If you watch the way he's moving in some of these videos, kind of almost has a, come on, who's the fighter that I'm thinking of here? Man, the guy that just fought Paddy Pimblett. Of course, the name's going to slip my mind right now, but you guys know who I'm talking about. Jordan Levitt. He almost has a little bit of a Jordan Levitt type of demeanor to him, but it's not the case. When he's in there and he's throwing down, he's brutal with his striking. He's technically sound, and I like this fighter. And you guys know I love watching some of these Japanese prospects make their way over to the UFC, so I'm really hoping he gets the job done and gets the contract. We take a look over at the betting line. He's basically a 2-1 favorite, a -210 with a comeback of +160 on José Henrique. I think that line may be a tad high. If I was to be targeting Kinoshita, I would personally want him right around a -185 or better. I think that's the route I'm going as of now. José Henrique is still a young fighter that has a lot of promise, and you could expect to see growth in his game as well. And with his range and whatnot, 6'5", he has a 5-inch height advantage. He's going to have an extensive reach advantage with his legs and his arms for sure, even though there's no reach here on Kinoshita. Maybe he could do some work from the outside and land some unorthodox types of knees as they clash. And we don't have an age for him here, but he is a young fighter, I do believe. I was trying to look into this. I believe, if anyone finds that out, comment below, but I believe he's like 25 maybe. I believe he's a younger fighter, so you can expect to see a lot of growth in his game as well. But I got to go with Yusaku Kinoshita. I'm telling you guys, the kid is a stud. He's a well-rounded fighter, and I know that he's going to show up and look to put a show out there for us. So that's who I'm picking to win the fight. But from a betting standpoint, just be a little wary if you're targeting all these heavy favorites. We've seen how the show has gone. I mean, some of these dogs are going to pop up. So if you're just slamming these favorites, it could definitely cost you some money. But again, you guys know how I give it to you, man. We break down the tape and I tell you how I see these fights going, and we talk about what we see on tape, which fighters do what very well, and how their overall games are looking and with their development and all that. So, but from a betting standpoint, again, there's some value on Blake Bilder, in my opinion. Who else do we have value on? I would stay away from the Viktoriya Dudakova fight, in my opinion. I think you could throw some money on her and it could just literally get thrown down the toilet. You got a fighter in Rodrigo Lídio, who I said is potentially live to get that knockout in the fight. So if you can get a juicy line on that one way or another, even if you want to take him straight up, I mean, he is a sharpshooter, and Matěj Rębecki pushes that pace. He gives his fighters opportunities to land on him as he goes in and really pushes the pace. And then you have Sedriques Dumas, which, check this out, guys. I think we just saw some live line movement as we're recording this. Check this out. Matěj Peňáz drops to a -145. I think he was just a -170, right? As we just broke that fight down. So action coming in on Dumas as we're recording this. I told you guys, he's a showstopper, and these are two big boys that are going to clash. But in my opinion, now with that line movement, I see more value on the Peňáz line, where I think that's maybe a line that's reachable there at -145. It's not too steep. So, but you keep an eye on that line, because potentially it continues to go that route, and you can even get a better line. If you're going the Dumas line, you shouldn't have been waiting. Then you wouldn't be on top of that line already, because it's just getting worse and worse. All right, guys. So hopefully this video has helped you guys get a little bit of a leg up for the fight card. I appreciate you guys more than you'll ever know. As I always tell you, appreciate all you guys for checking in with me here and talking some fights with me. Hit the comment section below. Tell me what fights you guys are targeting, which fights you're most looking forward to. All right. I think that's about it. If you want to keep up to date with me, more lively, up to the minute, catch me on Instagram. You can catch me over there on my Instagram stories. Shoot me a message. Shoot me an email at mmafortuneteller@gmail.com. Catch me on Twitter. If you want to work with me for my official plays, of course, I'm always open to that. Reach out to me. I can give you guys my pricing. And I think that we'll leave you guys on that, all right? Enjoy the fights tomorrow night. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.